high, powerful and respected judge approaches the court to conduct a trial that could shake the country's structures. But everything stops when a frightened and hungry street girl shouts, "Don't come in, they'll poison you." 2 hours later, a glass of wine is served during a toast, and what he discovers next will leave you shocked. If this story interested you, subscribe to our channel, don't forget to like this video, and tell us which city you're watching us from. We'll keep going. Judge Alexander Morgan adjusted his tie as he stood before the mirror in his chambers. The weight of today's case pressed heavily on his shoulders, but his steely blue eyes reflected the unwavering determination that had become his trademark over 2 decades on the bench. The upcoming trial of business magnate Robert Thaddeus Sterling would be the most significant of his career, a case that threatened to expose the darkest corners of political and corporate corruption in the city. The morning sun cast long shadows through the Venetian blinds as he gathered his files. His assistant, Sarah Chen, knocked softly before entering with his usual morning coffee. "The security team is ready, Your Honor. The media presence outside is intense." Alexander took a measured sip from his cup. "Thank you, Sarah. Any last-minute changes I should know about?" "No, sir. Though Mr. Sterling's defense team has filed 3 more motions to dismiss, they're getting desperate. Sarah's efficiency was one of the reasons he'd kept her as his assistant for the past 8 years. She could read a situation and people with remarkable accuracy. Desperation makes people dangerous, Sarah. Let's hope that's all we have to deal with today." He couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that had plagued him since the case files first landed on his desk. The evidence against Sterling was substantial: doctored contracts, offshore accounts, recorded conversations with political figures. But something felt off, like the visible part of an iceberg concealing its true mass beneath the surface. Outside his chambers, the courthouse buzzed with activity. Security personnel lined the corridors, their presence a reminder of the death threats he'd received since announcing he would personally oversee the Sterling case. Alexander had faced threats before. They came with the territory, when you made a career of confronting corruption. But these felt different, more immediate, more real. The walk to the courthouse entrance was a daily ritual he usually enjoyed, a moment to center himself before entering the arena of justice. Today, however, the marble corridors felt more like a tunnel leading to an uncertain destination. His security detail moved in practiced formation around him as they approached the main entrance. The morning air was crisp, carrying the first hints of autumn. Camera flashes erupted as he emerged, reporters shouting questions that merged into white noise. Alexander maintained his composed expression, the same one that had earned him the nickname the Stone Judge in legal circles. But then something unexpected cut through the chaos. A small figure darted between the guards, moving with the quick desperation of someone used to evading capture. Alexander's security team tensed, but before they could react, a girl, no, more than 7 years old, stood directly in his path. Her clothes were worn, her dark hair tangled, but it was her eyes that caught his attention. They held a terror that no child should know. "Don't go in," she screamed, her voice raw with desperation. "They're going to poison you." The security team moved to intercept her, but Alexander raised his hand, stopping them. The girl's words had cut through his professional armor, touching something deep within him. Her eyes locked with his for a brief moment before the guards gently but firmly moved her aside. "Wait," Alexander called out, but the girl had already disappeared into the crowd with the practiced ease of someone used to vanishing. The incident lasted less than a minute, but something about it shook him more than any threat he'd received. Inside, the courtroom awaited, its ancient wood paneling and solemn atmosphere usually providing comfort in their permanence. Today, however, Alexander found himself scanning the faces before him with new scrutiny. Defense attorneys in expensive suits, prosecutors with their carefully organized files, journalists scribbling in notebooks, and in the center of it all, Robert Sterling himself, radiating an aura of untouchable confidence. As he took his place, at the bench, Alexander couldn't shake the image of the girl's terrified eyes. In 2 decades of serving justice, he had learned to trust his instincts. Those eyes had been telling him something important. And despite the gravity of the case before him, despite the packed courtroom and the national attention, it was the warning of a homeless child that echoed most loudly in his mind. The bailiff called the court to order, and Alexander surveyed the room one final time. In the gallery, he noticed a man he didn't recognize, watching him with unusual intensity. The man's suit was perfectly tailored, but his posture spoke of something other than legal training. Their eyes met briefly, and the man's lip curled in what might have been a smile or a sneer. "In the case of the state versus Robert Thaddeus Sterling," Alexander began, his voice carrying the authority that had become his hallmark, "we are here to address the charges of corporate fraud, bribery, and corruption." He paused, looking directly at Sterling, whose confident smile never wavered. "Let the record show that these proceedings begin at 9:45 a.m. As he spoke these routine words, Alexander made a mental note to find that girl. In his experience, truth often came from the most unexpected sources, and something told him she was key to understanding what was really at stake in this case. The morning's events had set something in motion, something that would challenge everything he thought he knew about justice, corruption, and the price of truth. The industrial district loomed before Alexander like a forgotten city, its abandoned warehouses casting long shadows in the fading twilight. He had dismissed his security detail, knowing their presence would only draw attention. Detective Torres walked beside him, both men dressed casually to blend in with the few workers still in the area. "The girl was last seen near Sterling's old processing plant," Torres said, pointing to a massive structure with broken windows. "Local shop owners say she appears most evenings, usually around this time." Alexander surveyed the area, noting security cameras mounted on adjacent buildings. "Those cameras, are they still active?" "Some are. We've been monitoring the feeds, but she knows how to avoid them. Smart kid." They moved carefully through the shadowy streets, their footsteps echoing off concrete walls. The air carried the musty scent of abandonment, mixed with something else, something chemical that made Alexander's nose twitch. "Judge Morgan," a small voice called from the shadows. They turned to see the girl standing in a narrow alley, her small frame half hidden behind a dumpster. She looked even younger up close, her face smudged with dirt but her eyes sharp and alert. "I'm here to help," Alexander said softly, staying where he was to avoid frightening her. "Can you tell me what you saw?" She glanced nervously at Torres. Alexander nodded reassuringly. "He's a friend, you're safe with us. They meet in there," she pointed to the warehouse. "Important people. They talk about you a lot, about making you go away." "How long have you been watching them?" Torres asked gently. "Since they took my mum away." Her voice cracked slightly. "She used to write things in her notebook about them. Bad things they did, then one day she didn't come back." Alexander felt his heart tighten. "Your mother, what was her name?" "Delena Martinez. She was a reporter." The girl's chin lifted slightly with pride. "She said sometimes you have to be brave to tell the truth." The name hit Alexander like a physical blow. Elena Martinez, the investigative journalist who had disappeared while investigating corporate corruption. Her case had been handled by Judge William Harrison, now retired. The case had been quickly closed, labeled as a voluntary disappearance. "What's your name?" Alexander asked, kneeling to meet. Her eyes, Sophia, she stepped slightly forward. "Mom said if anything happened to her, I should find someone who wasn't afraid of them. That's why I waited and watched. I saw you on TV, how you fight against bad people. But they're planning something. At the lunch tomorrow." Torres and Alexander exchanged glances. The annual Judicial Excellence Luncheon was scheduled for the following day, an event where Sterling's company was, ironically, one of the main sponsors. "Sophia, would you be willing to come somewhere safe? There are people who can protect you, help you tell your story." She hesitated, years of street survival warring with hope in her eyes. "Will you make them pay for what they did to my mom?" "I promise you, I will do everything in my power to uncover the truth and ensure justice is served." Alexander's voice carried the weight of absolute conviction, A sudden noise from the warehouse made Sophia flinch. Torres immediately moved to investigate, his hand instinctively moving to his concealed weapon. "Someone's coming," Sophia whispered urgently. Alexander could hear voices approaching, accompanied by the sound of expensive shoes on concrete. Without hesitation, he guided Sophia behind a large shipping container, signaling Torres to stay back. 3 men emerged from the warehouse, their conversation carrying clearly in the evening air. Alexander recognized James Winchester's voice, though his tone was very different from his courtroom manner. "The judge is becoming a problem. The lunch tomorrow is our best opportunity. Everything is arranged?" "The sommelier has been taken care of," another voice responded. "Our man will handle the wine service. 1 sip is all it will take." "And the evidence?" "All digital trails lead to our offshore accounts. Even if they investigate, they'll find nothing connecting to the main operation." The men moved past their hiding spot, unaware of their audience. Alexander felt Sophia's small hand grip his, tightly, her body trembling but her stance determined. After the men departed, Torres rejoined them, his expression grim. "Got it all recorded, but we'll need more than this to move against them directly." "The notebooks," Sophia said suddenly. "Mom's notebooks, I know where she hid them." Alexander looked at her with newfound respect. This child, who had survived alone on the streets, had been protecting vital evidence all along. "Torres, call in your most trusted team. We need to get Sophia to safety and retrieve those notebooks. And we need to handle this carefully. The wrong move could alert them." "What about tomorrow's lunch?" Torres asked. Alexander's expression hardened with determination. "We'll be there, but not as they expect. Sophia has given us the advantage of knowing their plans. Now it's time to turn their own trap against them." As they led Sophia to Torres's unmarked car, Alexander noticed a change in her demeanor. For the first time, hope had replaced fear in her eyes. She had carried her mother's truth alone for so long, waiting for the right moment, the right person to trust. Looking at her, Alexander made a silent vow. This wasn't just about exposing corruption anymore. It was about justice for a brave reporter who had sacrificed everything to uncover the truth, and for the daughter who had kept that truth alive against impossible odds. The industrial district loomed before Alexander like a forgotten city, its abandoned warehouses casting long shadows in the fading twilight. He had dismissed his security detail, knowing their presence would only draw attention. Detective Torres walked beside him, both men dressed casually to blend in with the few workers still in the area. "The girl was last seen near Sterling's old processing plant," Torres said, pointing to a massive structure with broken windows. "Local shop owners say she appears most evenings, usually around this time." Alexander surveyed the area, noting security cameras mounted on adjacent buildings. "Those cameras, are they still active?" "Some are. We've been monitoring the feeds, but she knows how to avoid them. Smart kid." They moved carefully through the shadowy streets, their footsteps echoing off concrete walls. The air carried the musty scent of abandonment, mixed with something else, something chemical that made Alexander's nose twitch. "Judge Morgan," a small voice called from the shadows. They turned to see the girl standing in a narrow alley, her small frame half hidden behind a dumpster. She looked even younger up close, her face smudged with dirt but her eyes sharp and alert. "I'm here to help," Alexander said softly, staying where he was to avoid frightening her. "Can you tell me what you saw?" She glanced nervously at Torres. Alexander nodded reassuringly. "He's a friend. You're safe with us." "They meet in there," she pointed to the warehouse. "Important people. They talk about you a lot, about making you go away." "How long have you been watching them?" Torres asked gently. "Since they took my mom away." Her voice cracked slightly. "She used to write things in her notebook about them. Bad things they did. Then one day she didn't come back." Alexander felt his heart tighten. "Your mother, what was her name?" "Elena Martinez. She was a reporter." The girl's chin lifted slightly with pride. "She said sometimes you have to be brave to tell the truth." The name hit Alexander like a physical blow. Elena Martinez, the investigative journalist who had disappeared while investigating corporate corruption. Her case had been handled by Judge William Harrison, now retired. The case had been quickly closed, labeled as a voluntary disappearance. "What's your name?" Alexander asked, kneeling to meet her eyes. "Sophia." She stepped slightly forward. "Mum said if anything happened to her, I should find someone who wasn't afraid of them. That's why I waited and watched. I saw you on TV, how you fight against bad people. But they're planning something. At the lunch tomorrow." Torres and Alexander exchanged glances. The annual Judicial Excellence Luncheon was scheduled for the following day, an event where Sterling's company was, ironically, one of the main sponsors. "Sophia, would you be willing to come somewhere safe? There are people who can protect you, help you tell your story." She hesitated, years of street survival warring with hope in her eyes. "Will you make them pay for what they did to my mum? I promise you, I will do everything in my power to uncover the truth and ensure justice is served." Alexander's voice carried the weight of absolute conviction. A sudden noise from the warehouse made Sophia flinch. Torres immediately moved to investigate, his hand instinctively moving to his concealed weapon. "Someone's coming," Sophia whispered, urgently. Alexander could hear voices approaching, accompanied by the sound of expensive shoes on concrete. Without hesitation, he guided Sophia behind a large shipping container, signaling Torres to stay back. 3 men emerged from the warehouse, their conversation carrying clearly in the evening air. Alexander recognized James Winchester's voice, though his tone was very different from his courtroom manner. "The judge is becoming a problem. The lunch tomorrow is our best opportunity. Everything is arranged?" "The sommelier has been taken care of," another voice responded. "Our man will handle the wine service. 1 sip is all it will take." "And the evidence?" "All digital trails lead to our offshore accounts. Even if they investigate, they'll find nothing connecting to the main operation." The men moved past their hiding spot, unaware of their audience. Alexander felt Sophia's small hand grip his, tightly, her body trembling but her stance determined. After the men departed, Torres rejoined them, his expression grim. "Got it all recorded, but we'll need more than this to move against them directly." "The notebooks," Sophia said suddenly. "Mom's notebooks. I know where she hid them." Alexander looked at her with newfound respect. This child, who had survived alone on the streets, had been protecting vital evidence all along. "Torres, call in your most trusted team. We need to get Sophia to safety and retrieve those notebooks, and we need to handle this carefully. The wrong move could alert them." "What about tomorrow's lunch?" Torres asked. Alexander's expression hardened with determination. "We'll be there, but not as they expect. Sophia has given us the advantage of knowing their plans. Now it's time to turn their own trap against them." As they led Sophia to Torres's unmarked car, Alexander noticed a change in her demeanor. For the first time, hope had replaced fear in her eyes. She had carried her mother's truth alone for so long, waiting for the right moment, the right person to trust. Looking at her, Alexander made a silent vow. This wasn't just about exposing corruption anymore. It was about justice for a brave reporter who had sacrificed everything to uncover the truth, and for the daughter who had kept that truth alive against impossible odds. The aftermath of the Judicial Excellence Luncheon sent shockwaves through the city's legal community. In his chambers, Alexander sat with Sophia, who was finally clean and wearing fresh clothes provided by Sarah. The girl's dark hair had been neatly braided, and though she still carried herself with the wariness of someone used to running, there was a new steadiness in her gaze. "What happens now?" Sophia asked, her small fingers tracing the edge of her mother's recovered notebook. The pages were filled with Elena Martinez's meticulous notes, each entry a piece of the puzzle she had died trying to complete. "Now," Alexander said gently, "we make sure you're safe and taken care of. Detective Torres has arranged for a wonderful foster family who specializes in helping children who have been through difficult situations." Sophia's face fell slightly. "Will I still be able to see you? You're the only one who believed me, who helped me finish what Mom started." Alexander felt something shift in his heart. Over the past few days, this remarkable child had shown more courage and determination than many adults he knew. She had survived alone, protected crucial evidence, and risked everything to prevent injustice. "Actually," he said carefully, "I've been thinking about another possibility. If you're interested, I'd like to apply to become your guardian." Sophia's eyes widened. "You mean live with you? Like a real home?" "Exactly like a real home, but only if that's what you want. I know it's a big decision, and you've had to make too many big decisions already in your young life." Tears welled up in Sophia's eyes, but she quickly wiped them away, a habit formed from years of showing no weakness on the streets. "Mom would have liked you. She always said the most important thing was to stand up for what's right, no matter what." "Your mother was an incredibly brave woman, Sophia. She raised an incredibly brave daughter." Alexander reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a framed photograph of Elena Martinez that Sarah had found in the newspaper's archives. "I thought you might like to have this." Sophia took the photograph reverently, her fingers touching her mother's smiling face. She was working on a big story. She said it would change everything, make the city better. That's why they... She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. "And she succeeded," Alexander assured her. "Thanks to her work, and to you protecting it all this time, we're uncovering the full extent of Sterling's operation. Your mother's investigation is helping us clean up the entire system." A knock at the door preceded Sarah's entrance. "Your Honor, the Child Services representative is here to discuss the guardianship application." She smiled warmly at Sophia. "And I brought hot chocolate, with extra marshmallows." Sophia's face lit up, perhaps the first truly childlike expression Alexander had seen from her. As she sipped her hot chocolate, leaving a small marshmallow mustache, Alexander could see glimpses of the carefree child she might have been, might still become. "Miss Chen," Sophia said, using Sarah's formal name with endearing seriousness, "will you visit us too? Judge Morgan probably needs help learning how to take care of a kid." Sarah laughed. "Oh, I'll definitely be around. Someone has to make sure he doesn't serve cereal for dinner every night." "I'll have you know I can cook," Alexander protested with mock indignation. "I make excellent pancakes." "Pancakes aren't dinner food," Sophia informed him solemnly, then broke into a grin. "But maybe sometimes." "Sometimes," he agreed, marveling at how natural this felt, this small moment of family banter with a child he'd known for less than a week. The Child Services representative, Mrs. Rodriguez, entered with a warm smile. She had already reviewed Alexander's preliminary application and, given the extraordinary circumstances, was helping to expedite the process. "Well, Sophia," Mrs. Rodriguez said, sitting down, "I understand you and Judge Morgan have formed quite a bond. Would you like to tell me how you feel about the possibility of living with him?" Sophia straightened in her chair, her expression serious. "He's a good person, the kind Mom would have trusted. And he doesn't treat me like I'm just a kid. He listened to me when no one else would." She paused, then added quietly, "I feel safe with him." Mrs. Rodriguez nodded, making notes. "And Judge Morgan, are you prepared for the challenges of raising a child who has experienced significant trauma?" "I'm prepared to give Sophia whatever support she needs," Alexander replied. "I've already arranged for consultations with child psychologists who specialize in helping children process trauma. I'm also enrolling in parenting classes and working with Sarah to create a stable, nurturing environment." As they discussed practical arrangements, school enrollment, medical care, home adjustments, Alexander watched Sophia. She was paying close attention to everything, her intelligent eyes taking in every detail. She had spent too long having to understand and analyze everything around her just to survive. Now, finally, she could begin to relax, to trust, to simply be a child. "One last question," Mrs. Rodriguez said to Sophia. "What would you like your future to look like?" Sophia considered this carefully. "I want to be like my mum, someone who fights for the truth, and like Judge Morgan, someone who makes sure justice happens." She looked at Alexander. "Maybe I could be both." "You can be anything you want to be," Alexander assured her. "And whatever path you choose, you won't have to walk it alone anymore." As the meeting concluded, Sophia remained in her chair, finishing her hot chocolate. The afternoon sun streamed through the window, casting a warm glow over the chamber. For the first time in years, she looked completely at peace. Sarah began clearing away the cups, pausing to squeeze Sophia's shoulder gently. "Welcome to the family, sweetheart. Things are going to be different now." Different indeed, Alexander thought. The corruption case would continue to unfold. Justice would take its course, but something even more important was happening here. In trying to protect the law, he had found something he never knew he was missing. A chance to make a real difference in one child's life, and in doing so, perhaps make a difference in the future of justice itself. The transition from his orderly bachelor life to becoming Sophia's guardian brought changes Alexander never expected. His apartment, once a showcase of minimalist design, now featured colorful artwork on the walls and a bedroom transformed with purple paint and twinkling fairy lights, Sophia's chosen decor after careful consideration. "Are you sure you don't want to start school right away?" Alexander asked one morning over breakfast. They had settled into a routine. He made pancakes, his specialty despite Sarah's teasing, while Sophia set the table with precise attention to detail. "Mrs. Rodriguez said I could take time to adjust first," Sophia replied, carefully cutting her pancakes into perfect triangles. "And Dr. Bennett thinks it's good for me to have space to process everything." Dr. Bennett, Sophia's therapist, had become an invaluable ally in helping both of them navigate their new relationship. She helped Sophia work through her trauma and advised Alexander on how to support a child who had experienced such profound loss. "Besides," Sophia continued, "I'm not behind in my studies. Mom taught me a lot, and I kept reading while—" She paused, then added quietly, "while I was waiting." Alexander marveled at her resilience. Even during her time on the streets, she had found ways to learn, sneaking into libraries and borrowing discarded newspapers. Her intelligence and determination reminded him so much of Elena. Sarah arrived as they were finishing breakfast, carrying a stack of files and her usual tablet. She had taken on an unofficial role as part-time assistant, part-time aunt to Sophia, helping both of them adjust to their new reality. "Good morning, family," she called out cheerfully. "Sophia, don't forget we have that art class this afternoon, and Judge, the U.S. Attorney's Office, sent over the latest documents on the Sterling case." Sophia's eyes flickered with interest at the mention of Sterling. Though Alexander tried to shield her from the ongoing investigation, she remained keenly aware of its progress. It was, after all, inextricably linked to her mother's legacy. "Can I help?" she asked, trying to sound casual. "Mom always said 2 pairs of eyes are better than 1. Alexander exchanged a glance with Sarah. They had discussed how to handle Sophia's natural curiosity about the case while protecting her from its darker aspects. "Actually," Sarah said, "I could use your help organizing some of the public records. Your mother's notes have given us important clues about where to look, but there's a lot of material to sort through." Sophia beamed, clearly pleased to be included. Alexander watched as Sarah set her up with a stack of newspaper clippings and public court documents, carefully screened to exclude anything too disturbing. As they worked, Alexander received a call from Detective Torres. "We've made progress on tracking the offshore accounts," Torres reported. "Sterling's network is unraveling faster than we expected. Several of his associates are looking to make deals." "Good," Alexander replied, watching Sophia as she methodically organized the documents, her face showing the same focused expression he remembered seeing in photos of Elena. "The sooner we close this chapter, the better." After finishing his call, Alexander found Sophia standing by the window, holding one of the newspaper clippings. It was an old article about Elena Martinez, featuring a photo of her accepting an award for investigative journalism. "She looks so happy here," Sophia said softly. This was right after she exposed corruption in the city housing department. She said sometimes making things right means making powerful people angry, but that's how you know you're on the right track. Alexander put a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Your mother's work helped a lot of people, and it's still helping people now." "I know," Sophia nodded. "That's why I want to be a journalist too. Or maybe a judge, or both." She turned to him with sudden enthusiasm. "Is that possible? To be both?" With your determination? I wouldn't bet against it. Alexander smiled. But first, I believe you have an art class to get to. Sarah gathered her things, ready to take Sophia to her afternoon activities. These classes, art, music, dance, were part of their strategy to help Sophia reclaim the childhood she had lost. Each new experience seemed to unlock another piece of her personality, revealing the joyful, creative girl beneath the layers of survival instincts. Judge Morgan? Sophia asked, pausing at the door. Can we have breakfast for dinner tonight with the special blueberry syrup? Breakfast for dinner it is, he agreed, earning a bright smile before she disappeared with Sarah. Alone in his office, Alexander looked at the family photo now sitting on his desk, a casual snapshot Sarah had taken of him and Sophia in the park, both laughing at something now forgotten. Next to it sat a formal portrait of Elena Martinez, her determined expression so similar to her daughter's. We're taking care of her, he said softly to Elena's picture. She's safe now, and she's going to change the world, just like you did. The afternoon sun cast warm shadows across his desk, where Sophia's careful organization system was evident in the neat stacks of documents. She had labeled each pile with sticky notes, her handwriting precise and determined. Even in this simple task, she showed the same dedication to truth and order that had defined her mother's work. Alexander turned back to the case files, more determined than ever to see justice served, not just for the city, but for the brave reporter who had sacrificed everything to expose the truth, and for the remarkable daughter who had kept that truth alive through years of hardship. Together they were building something new, a family forged in the pursuit of justice, bound together by courage, trust, and the unshakable belief that truth would always find its way into the light. The discovery came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. Sophia was helping Sarah organize old case files when she found it, a photograph tucked inside a forgotten folder. The image showed a younger Judge Harrison standing beside Elena Martinez at a charity gala, their expressions tense despite their smiles. Sarah, Sophia called, her voice quivering slightly. Look at this. Mom never told me she knew Judge Harrison. Sarah examined the photograph, her professional composure briefly slipping. Judge Morgan needs to see this. She quickly sent a message to Alexander, who was presiding over a routine hearing. Within an hour, Alexander arrived at his chambers, his robe still on. Show me, he said, and Sarah handed him the photograph. His expression darkened as he studied it. There's more, Sophia said, pulling out her mother's notebook. I found something in her coding system. She used to write important things in a special way. Her small fingers traced the margins where seemingly random numbers and letters formed a pattern. Alexander watched in amazement as Sophia decoded her mother's notes. Eleanor had clearly taught her daughter more than just survival skills. She'd prepared her to continue her work if necessary. Mom wrote that Judge Harrison was helping her at first, Sophia explained, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes. He gave her information about Sterling's companies, but then something changed. She said he started acting different, scared maybe. Detective Torres arrived shortly after, responding to Alexander's urgent call. As Sophia explained her discovery, Torres took careful notes, his experienced eyes, catching details others might miss. This could explain why Harrison closed the investigation so quickly, Torres mused. He wasn't just covering for Sterling, he was covering his own tracks. But why did he stop helping? Sarah wondered aloud. What made him switch sides? Sophia had been quietly flipping through her mother's notebook, her face scrunched in concentration. Wait, there's something here about a meeting. Mum wrote that Harrison told her about a secret gathering at Sterling's lake house. Important people were there. She said Harrison looked terrified when he mentioned it. Alexander and Torres exchanged significant looks. The lake house had been searched after Sterling's arrest, but they'd found nothing suspicious. Perhaps they hadn't known exactly what to look for. Sophia, Alexander said gently, would you be willing to help us understand more of your mother's notes? No one knows her system like you do. Sophia straightened in her chair, a familiar determination crossing her features. Mom always said the truth needs brave people to protect it. I want to help. Sarah brought them all coffee and hot chocolate for Sophia. As they settled in for a long afternoon of investigation, Sophia moved between the adults, explaining her mother's complex coding system, helping them piece together a story that had been hidden in plain sight for years. "Look at this," she said, pointing to a series of numbers. "Mom used this pattern when she was writing about bank accounts. And here," and she flipped to another page, "these symbols mean she had proof, documents or recordings." As they worked, Alexander couldn't help but marvel at the bond between mother and daughter. Eleanor hadn't just taught Sophia to survive, she'd prepared her to carry on her work, embedding the tools she'd need in games and stories that would seem innocent to anyone else. "Judge Morgan," Sophia said suddenly, her voice small but urgent. "I remember something else, something Mum told me the night before she disappeared. She said if anything happened to her, I should look for a blue box in the lake house. She made me memorize where it would be, 3rd floor behind the painting of sailing ships in the wall." Torres was already on his phone, requesting a new search warrant. The lake house was sealed after Sterling's arrest. Nothing's been moved. Alexander knelt beside Sophia's chair. "You've been carrying this memory all this time?" She nodded, tears finally breaking through her composed facade. "I didn't know who to tell. Mom said to wait for the right person, someone who would believe me and not be afraid to act." Sarah wrapped a protective arm around Sophia's shoulders, as Alexander and Torres quickly formulated a plan. Within hours, a team was assembled to search the lake house, this time with specific instructions about where to look. As they waited for news, Sophia fell asleep on the office couch, exhausted by the emotional weight of the day. Alexander covered her with his suit jacket, watching her peaceful expression, so different from the scared child who had warned him on the courthouse steps just weeks ago. "She's remarkable," Sarah said softly, bringing him another coffee. "Eleanor didn't just leave behind evidence. She left behind someone brave enough to make sure it would be found." Alexander nodded, his throat tight with emotion. Eleanor knew what she was doing. She taught Sophia everything she'd need to know, wrapped it all in games and stories that wouldn't raise suspicion. She was protecting both the truth and her daughter. Late that evening, Torres called. His voice was charged with excitement. "We found it. The blue box was exactly where Sophia said it would be. Alexander, this is everything. Financial records, photos, recorded conversations. Elena had gathered enough evidence to bring down not just Sterling, but an entire network of corruption." Alexander looked at Sophia, still sleeping peacefully. She waited years for this moment, survived on the streets, protected her mother's work, never lost hope that someone would listen. "The question is," Torres said seriously, "what do we do now? This evidence implicates some very powerful people who are still free." "We do what Elena would have wanted," Alexander replied firmly. "We follow the truth wherever it leads, and this time we make sure nothing stops justice from being served." As if sensing she was being discussed, Sophia stirred slightly in her sleep, clutching her mother's notebook closer. Alexander adjusted his jacket around her shoulders, silently promising both mother and daughter that their courage would not be in vain. The truth they had protected for so long was finally about to come to light. The contents of Elena's blue box spread across Alexander's dining room table like pieces of an intricate puzzle. Sophia sat cross-legged in a chair, carefully organizing documents according to her mother's coding system, while Sarah and Torres catalogued each item for the official investigation. "Mom was really thorough," Sophia said proudly, pointing to a series of photographs. "See how she always got the same scene from different angles? She said that's how you prove nothing was staged." Alexander studied the photographs, impressed by Elena's attention to detail. The images showed various meetings between Sterling and his associates, each carefully dated and annotated. But it was the audio recordings that proved most revealing. "Listen to this," Torres said, playing a clip they'd just finished processing. Judge Harrison's voice emerged clearly. "Sterling's getting nervous. Martinez is getting too close to the truth about the foundation." Sophia's head snapped up at the mention of her mother's name. Alexander moved closer to her, providing silent support as they continued listening. "The foundation has to be protected at all costs," Sterling's voice replied. "Too many powerful people are involved. Handle it." Sarah was taking notes, her usual efficient manner tinged with anger. "The foundation? That's the youth charity Sterling established, isn't it? The one that closed suddenly last year?" "Yes," Alexander confirmed. "We thought it was just a tax shelter, but clearly there was more to it." He glanced at Sophia, who was studying her mother's notebook with renewed intensity. "Here," she said suddenly, flipping to a page filled with her mother's coded notes. "Mom wrote about the foundation a lot. She said the numbers didn't make sense. Too much money going in, not enough coming out. And look at these names." Torres leaned in to examine the list Sophia had decoded. His eyes widened. "These are some of the most influential people in the city. Judges, politicians, business leaders, all connected to Sterling's foundation," Alexander mused. "But what were they really doing with all that money?" Sophia was already flipping through more pages of her mother's notebook. "Mom wrote something about offshore accounts. She said the foundation was like a washing machine for dirty money." The adults exchanged impressed glances at Sophia's grasp of complex concepts. Eleanor had clearly raised her daughter to understand the importance of following money trails. The foundation wasn't just laundering money, Sarah realized, examining bank statements from the blue box. It was a way to control people. "Look at these payments, perfectly timed to coincide with major court decisions, policy changes, contract awards." "And Judge Harrison?" Sophia asked quietly. "Was he part of it too?" Alexander sat down beside her. "It looks like your mother caught him in a moment of conscience. He tried to help her expose the truth, but then something made him change his mind." "Fear," Torres said grimly, holding up another photograph. This one showed Harrison in what appeared to be a heated argument with Sterling. Elena captured this the day before Harrison suddenly closed her case. "Our tea." They continued piecing together the evidence. Alexander noticed Sophia growing quieter, her usual determined expression replaced by something more contemplative. "What are you thinking about?" he asked gently. "Mom always said that doing the right thing isn't always easy, but it's always worth it," Sophia replied, running her fingers over her mother's handwriting. She knew what might happen, but she kept going anyway, because it was right. Sarah wiped away a tear, trying to maintain her professional composure. "She did it to make the world better for you, Sophia. Everything she documented, every risk she took, it was all to give you a future in a more just world. And now we're going to finish what she started," Alexander promised. "Thanks to you protecting her work all this time, we can finally expose the whole truth." Torres was already making calls, coordinating with federal authorities to prepare for what would undoubtedly be a massive operation. The evidence Elena had gathered, combined with what they'd uncovered in the Sterling investigation, would shake the city's power structure to its core. "It's going to be complicated," Torres warned. "These people won't go down without a fight." "Then, we'll fight harder," Sophia said with quiet determination, so much like her mother's that it made Alexander's heart ache. "Mom always said that the truth is like a sunrise. You can try to hide from it, but it always comes out eventually." Alexander looked around his dining room, transformed into an impromptu investigation headquarters. Sarah was efficiently organizing evidence into categories. Torres was coordinating with his team, and Sophia, brave, brilliant Sophia, was at the center of it all, bringing her mother's work into the light. "You know what this means," he said to Sophia. "Things might get intense for a while. There will be a lot of attention, a lot of pressure." Sophia straightened in her chair, chin lifted in a gesture he'd come to recognize as her way of facing challenges head-on. "We can handle it. We're family now, right? And families stick together." "Always," Alexander confirmed, amazed at how naturally that word, family, had come to define their relationship. Together, they would honor Elena's sacrifice by ensuring that the truth she'd fought so hard to uncover would finally serve justice. As the evening deepened into night, they continued their work, surrounded by the evidence of one woman's incredible courage and her daughter's unwavering faith in justice. The path ahead would be challenging, but they would walk it together, guided by the light of truth that Elena Martinez had protected with her life. The media storm hit with full force. Headlines blazed across every newspaper and news channel. Sterling Foundation scandal rocks city elite. Corruption network exposed. Brave journalist's daughter key to breaking case. Despite Alexander's best efforts to shield her, Sophia's role in uncovering the truth had become public knowledge. "I don't mind," Sophia insisted one morning, watching news vans gathered outside their apartment building. "Mom would want people to know the truth." She sat at the breakfast counter working on her homework. She had finally started attending the prestigious Carter Academy, though Alexander had arranged for extra security measures. Sarah arrived with her usual efficiency, though now she carried not just case files, but also a stack of interview requests from major news outlets. "They all want to talk to Sophia," she reported, setting down her tablet, "especially after Judge Harrison's public confession." Harrison's televised statement had sent shockwaves through the legal community. He had admitted to being pressured into silence by Sterling's organization after initially trying to help Elena Martinez. His testimony had implicated dozens of prominent figures and sparked a wave of investigations across multiple jurisdictions. "What do you think, Sophia?" Alexander asked, watching her reaction carefully. "You don't have to do any interviews if you don't want to." Sophia considered this, absently stirring her cereal. "Could we do just one, together? Mom always said that sometimes you have to speak up, not just for yourself, but for everyone who can't speak anymore." Alexander felt a surge of pride mixed with protective concern. "We'll choose carefully. Make sure it's someone who will respect your story and tell it right." Catherine Rivera, Sarah suggested. "She's known for her integrity, and she was friends with Elena in journalism school. She's requested an exclusive interview with both of you." Sophia's eyes lit up. Mom mentioned her in her notebooks. She said Catherine was one of the good ones, someone who never compromised on the truth. As they discussed the interview arrangements, Detective Torres arrived with updates on the investigation. "The Foundation's overseas accounts are being traced," he reported. "We've already frozen assets in 3 countries, but there's something else you should see." He placed a file on the counter, careful to angle it away from Sophia. Alexander caught a glimpse of surveillance photos showing men in expensive suits entering various buildings around the city. "They're regrouping," Torres said quietly. "Sterling might be in custody, but some of his associates are still free. They're trying to salvage what they can, protect themselves." "Let them try," Alexander replied, his voice firm. "We have the evidence now. Eleanor's documentation is ironclad, and with Harrison's testimony." "Still," Torres interrupted, glancing meaningfully at Sophia, who was pretending not to listen while doing her math homework, "we should increase security, just as a precaution." Sarah had already pulled up her tablet, making arrangements. "I've coordinated with the school's security team, and I've arranged for additional protection during the interview with Catherine." Sophia looked up from her textbook. "I'm not scared," she declared, though her hand trembled slightly as she gripped her pencil. "Mom wasn't scared to tell the truth, and I'm not either." Alexander moved to her side, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Being brave doesn't mean you can't be scared, Sophia. It means doing what's right even when you are scared. Like Mom did," Sophia nodded, then added with a small smile, "and like you did when you believed me about the poison, even though everyone thought I was just a homeless kid." The memory of that first encounter still struck Alexander powerfully. This small, determined child, risking everything to warn a stranger about danger. Now, weeks later, she was no longer a stranger but family, and her courage continued to inspire everyone around her. "The interview is scheduled for tomorrow afternoon," Sarah announced. "Catherine wants to do it here, in your home. She thinks it will be more comfortable for Sophia." "Can I show her Mom's notebooks?" Sophia asked eagerly. "The real ones, not just the copies the investigators have." "Of course," Alexander agreed. "Your mother's work deserves to be seen and understood. She wasn't just gathering evidence. She was writing a story about truth and justice. As they prepared for the interview, life continued its new normal. Sophia worked on her homework, occasionally asking Alexander for help with particularly challenging math problems. Sarah coordinated security arrangements and managed the endless stream of media inquiries. Torres came and went, bringing updates on the investigation and checking security measures. That evening, as Alexander helped Sophia prepare for bed, now a cherished ritual that included reading together and talking about their day, she asked a question that caught him off guard. "Do you think Mom would be proud of what we're doing with her work?" Alexander sat on the edge of her bed, looking at the wall where they'd hung Elena's journalism awards, alongside Sophia's first school art projects, a perfect blend of past and present, of legacy and new beginnings. "Sophia, I think your mother would be more than proud. You've taken everything she taught you about courage, about truth, about justice, and you've used it to continue her work. You've helped expose corruption that seemed untouchable. You've shown that one person's commitment to truth can change the world." Sophia hugged her mother's notebook to her chest. She still slept with it nearby, though now more for comfort than protection. "Sometimes I dream about her," she confessed quietly. "In my dreams, she's smiling, like in that photo you found. And she tells me to keep going, to keep fighting for what's right." "That's exactly what we're doing," Alexander assured her. "Tomorrow, we'll tell your story, your mother's story, to the world. And we'll make sure everyone knows that justice prevails, not through power or money, but through the courage of people who refuse to let the truth remain hidden." As Sophia drifted off to sleep, Alexander stood in her doorway, watching her peaceful expression. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles in their ongoing fight for justice. But tonight, in this quiet moment, he could see the future taking shape. A future built on the foundation of one reporter's courage, preserved by her daughter's determination, and now being brought to light by their unlikely but unshakable family bond. Catherine Rivera arrived exactly on time, her professional demeanor softening as soon as she saw Sophia. The veteran journalist's eyes misted slightly as she took in the girl's features, so similar to her old friend Elena's. "You look just like your mother when she was your age," Catherine said warmly. "I remember her first day at journalism school. She had that same determined look you have right now." The interview setup was intimate. Just Catherine, her trusted cameraman Alexander, and Sophia seated in their living room. Sarah had arranged everything perfectly, from the lighting to the security personnel discreetly positioned outside. "Before we begin," Catherine said, "I want you both to know that this story will be told with the respect it deserves. Elena was more than just a colleague. She was a friend who showed me what real journalistic integrity looks like." Sophia sat straight-backed on the couch beside Alexander, her mother's notebook in her lap. "Mom wrote about you," she said. "She said you never backed down when people tried to stop you from printing the truth." Catherine smiled gently. "That sounds like Elena. She always saw the best in people who fought for truth." She turned to her cameraman and nodded. "Ready when you are." The interview began softly, with Catherine asking Sophia about her early memories of her mother. Sophia spoke with remarkable poise about Elena's dedication to justice, how she'd taught her daughter to decode complex information through games and stories. "She made it fun," Sophia explained, demonstrating with her mother's notebook. "Like this part here, it looks like doodles, but it's actually a map of connections between different companies. She taught me how to read it by making it into a treasure hunt game." Alexander watched proudly as Sophia explained her mother's innovative coding system, how she'd preserved crucial evidence while living on the streets, and finally how she'd found the courage to warn a stranger about an assassination attempt. "What made you trust Judge Morgan?" Catherine asked gently. Sophia glanced at Alexander, a small smile playing at her lips. "Mom always said you can tell a lot about people by watching how they treat others when they think no one important is looking. I watched him for weeks before the trial. He was kind to everyone, the cleaning staff, the security guards, even the stray cat that lives behind the courthouse." Catherine turned to Alexander. And what made you believe this young girl when she warned you about the poison? There was something in her eyes, Alexander replied thoughtfully. A certainty that came from truth, not fear. In my years on the bench, I've learned to recognize that look. Sophia had it, just like her mother did in all those courthouse photographs. The interview continued, covering the discovery of Elena's hidden evidence, the unraveling of Sterling's corruption network, and the ongoing investigations. Throughout it all, Sophia remained composed, though Alexander could feel her hand occasionally squeeze his when touching on particularly emotional moments. "What happens now?" Catherine asked as the interview drew to a close. The Sterling Foundation. Scandal has implicated dozens of powerful people. Are you concerned about backlash? The truth doesn't fear threats, Sophia said firmly, quoting one of her mother's favorite sayings. Mom knew the risks, but she kept going because it was right. Now we have to do the same. Alexander added, Elena Martinez left behind more than evidence. She left behind a daughter who embodies everything she fought for: courage, integrity, and an unwavering commitment to justice. Our job now is to ensure that her sacrifice leads to real change. After the cameras stopped rolling, Catherine wiped away tears. Elena would be so proud, she said to Sophia, not just of your courage, but of how you've helped create something beautiful out of something tragic. You found a new family while honoring your mother's legacy. As the crew packed up their equipment, Sophia showed Catherine more of her mother's notebooks, the two of them sharing stories about Elena. Alexander watched from the kitchen as they laughed over old photographs, struck by how this moment represented everything they were fighting for: the ability to transform pain into purpose, loss into legacy. Sarah arrived with afternoon snacks, having monitored the interview from her tablet. The initial clips are already going viral, she reported. People are calling Sophia the guardian of truth, a child who protected justice when adults failed to do so. Mom would laugh at that title, Sophia said, rejoining them in the kitchen. She always said the fanciest words mean nothing without actions behind them. Speaking of actions, Catherine interjected, I want you both to know that this story won't end with one interview. I'm establishing a scholarship in Elena's name for young journalists committed to investigative reporting. And Sophia, when you're ready, there will be a place for you in our junior journalism program. Sophia's eyes lit up. Really? Like a real journalist? Really? Catherine smiled. Though something tells me you might end up being both a journalist and a judge, just like you said you wanted to be. As they said goodbye to Catherine, Alexander reflected on how much had changed in the weeks since a brave child had stopped him on the courthouse steps. The corruption they'd exposed was being dismantled, justice was being served, but more importantly, something new had been built, a family forged in the pursuit of truth, a legacy honored through love and determination. That evening, as they sat together reviewing Sophia's homework, Alexander noticed her adding a new entry to her own notebook, one she'd started keeping after starting school. What are you writing? He asked. My own story, Sophia replied, her pen moving carefully across the page. Mom always said every truth needs someone to tell it. I want to tell the story of how love and justice can win, even when it seems impossible. Alexander smiled, recognizing Elena's spirit living on in her daughter's words. The truth had found its guardians in this unlikely family, and together they would ensure it remained in the light where it belonged. The impact of Catherine Rivera's interview reverberated through the city like waves in a pond. Sophia's story had captured the public's imagination, transforming her from an anonymous child into a symbol of hope and courage. But with that attention came new challenges. Look at this, Sarah said one morning, showing Alexander a series of emails on her tablet. Schools across the country want Sophia to speak to their students about civic responsibility and standing up for truth. There's even a children's book publisher interested in telling her story. Alexander glanced at Sophia, who was getting ready for school, carefully packing her backpack with the methodical precision she brought to everything. What do you think about all this attention, Sophia? She paused, considering the question with her characteristic thoughtfulness. Mom always said that stories have power. They can change how people think and act. Maybe my story can help other kids be brave too. The transformation in Sophia over the past months had been remarkable. While she maintained the careful awareness of her surroundings that life on the streets had taught her, she was also blooming into a confident, engaged student. Her teachers at Carter Academy reported that she often led class discussions about ethics and justice, drawing from her unique perspective and experiences. "Ms. Chen," Sophia called out, using Sarah's formal name as she still sometimes did when discussing serious matters. "Could we use some of the interview money to help other kids, like the ones still living on the streets?" Sarah smiled warmly. "Actually, I've been working on something related to that. Want to hear about it?" Sophia nodded eagerly, temporarily abandoning her backpack preparation. "We're establishing the Elena Martinez Foundation for Youth Advocacy," Sarah explained, pulling up a presentation on her tablet. "It will provide support for homeless children and help fund investigative journalism programs for young people." "A real foundation?" Sophia's eyes widened. "Not like Sterling's fake one." "Exactly," Alexander confirmed. "A legitimate organization, dedicated to everything your mother believed in: truth, justice, and protecting those who need help." The doorbell interrupted their discussion. Detective Torres entered, carrying a thick file folder and wearing an expression that Alexander had learned to recognize: new developments in the case. "Sophia, you're going to be late for school," Sarah said diplomatically, understanding the need for adult discussion. "I'll walk you down to the car." Once Sophia had left with Sarah, Torres spread several documents across the kitchen counter. "We've uncovered something interesting in Elena's old cases. Before she started investigating Sterling, she was looking into irregularities at several youth shelters, places that should have been helping kids like Sophia, but were mysteriously underfunded despite receiving large government grants." Alexander studied the documents, noting Elena's familiar handwriting in the margins. She was connecting the dots. Even then, the missing shelter funds, Sterling's foundation. It was all part of the same scheme, Torres confirmed. Sterling's foundation wasn't just laundering money. It was actively diverting resources meant for vulnerable children. The more kids on the streets, the easier it was for them to operate without scrutiny. The revelation hit Alexander hard. He thought of Sophia, surviving alone for so long in a system that had been deliberately corrupted. How many other children had suffered because of Sterling's greed? "There's more," Torres continued. "Elena had begun documenting cases of missing children, kids who disappeared from the streets without explanation. The police files were always mysteriously incomplete, investigations closed without proper follow-up. We need to reopen those cases," Alexander said firmly. "Every single one. Already on it. But here's where it gets interesting. Judge Harrison wasn't the only judge involved in burying these investigations. We've identified at least 3 other judges who consistently dismissed cases or sealed records that might have exposed the broader conspiracy." The implications were staggering. The corruption they'd uncovered wasn't just about money. It was about systematically silencing the most vulnerable members of society. Sarah returned as they were discussing next steps. "Sophia's safely at school," she reported, "and I've scheduled a meeting with the FBI's Special Task Force for tomorrow. They want to coordinate on the expanded investigation." "How's Sophia really doing with all this?" Torres asked, his gruff exterior softening slightly. Like everyone who got to know her, he had developed a protective instinct toward the brave young girl. "She's incredible," Alexander said proudly. "Yesterday, she gave a presentation to her class about investigative journalism. Her teacher said it was the most engaged she's ever seen the students." "Just like her mother," Torres nodded. "Elena had that same ability to make people care about justice and truth." The sound of Alexander's phone interrupted them. A text from Sophia. "Had an idea for the foundation. Can we help kids learn coding like Mom taught me? It could be like a secret message club for truth tellers." Alexander showed the message to Sarah and Torres, smiling. Even in the midst of an expanding investigation, Sophia remained focused on helping others, on turning her experiences into something positive. "You know," Sarah said thoughtfully, "she might be onto something there. Teaching kids to analyze information, recognize patterns, understand complex systems. These are crucial skills for future journalists and investigators. And it gives them power, Torres added. Knowledge and skills that can't be taken away from them, just like Elena gave Sofia. As they continued working through Elena's files, Alexander felt a renewed sense of purpose. What had started as one child's warning had grown into something much larger. A movement to expose corruption, protect the vulnerable, and create lasting change. Sarah was already typing on her tablet, expanding the Foundation's planned programs to include Sofia's coding club idea. "We should document everything," she said, how Elena taught Sofia how these skills helped her survive and ultimately expose the truth. It could become a model for youth empowerment programs nationwide. Sofia would like that, Alexander agreed, using her mother's methods to help other kids find their voice and strength. As the morning progressed, they uncovered more connections, more evidence of how deeply the corruption had penetrated the city's institutions. But unlike before, when such discoveries might have felt overwhelming, they now had something Elena Martinez hadn't, a network of committed people working together to ensure justice would prevail. Through it all, Alexander kept thinking of Sofia's simple yet profound observation: stories have power. Their story, Elena's courage, Sofia's resilience, the triumph of truth over corruption, was already inspiring others to speak up, to take action, to believe in the possibility of change. And this was just the beginning. The Elena Martinez Foundation's first youth coding workshop was held on a bright Saturday morning in the renovated community center. Sofia stood at the front of the room, her natural shyness overshadowed by her enthusiasm for sharing her mother's methods with other children. "Codes aren't just for hiding things," she explained to the group of eager faces before her. "They're for protecting important information until it's safe to share. Like this." She demonstrated a simple pattern using numbers and letters, the same way her mother had first taught her. Alexander watched from the back of the room, amazed at how confidently Sofia guided the other children through the exercises. Many of them came from situations similar to what she had experienced, lives touched by hardship and instability. But here, under Sofia's guidance, they were discovering their own strength. Sarah sat beside him, taking notes on her tablet. "The FBI's Youth Outreach Division wants to adapt this program nationwide," she whispered. "They say teaching kids these analytical skills could help prevent future corruption by creating a generation that knows how to recognize and document wrongdoing." The workshop was just one part of the Foundation's broader mission. In the weeks since Catherine's interview aired, they had established partnerships with youth shelters, journalism schools, and advocacy organizations across the city. Elena's methods of documenting evidence and protecting information were being transformed into educational programs that would help others stand up for truth and justice. "Look at this," one young participant called out excitedly, showing Sofia his notebook. "I used your mom's number system to track how many times the grocery store near my shelter changes their prices unfairly." Sofia beamed with pride. "That's perfect. Mom always said the best investigations start with paying attention to small details that others ignore." During the lunch break, Detective Torres arrived with news about the ongoing investigation. "We've identified more victims of the shelter funding scheme," he reported quietly to Alexander. "But this time, thanks to the Foundation's support network, we can actually help them." The Foundation had established a comprehensive support system for children affected by Sterling's corruption, providing not just immediate assistance, but long-term educational and emotional support. It was the kind of resource that might have helped Sofia during her time on the streets, and now she was helping to shape its programs. "Judge Morgan," Sofia called out, waving him over to her group. "Can you tell them about the time I warned you about the poison? They want to know how I knew to trust you." Alexander joined the circle of children, noting how they leaned forward eagerly, hungry for stories of courage and justice prevailing. "Sofia taught me something very important that day," he began. "She showed me that truth can come from unexpected places and that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is listen to voices others might ignore. The children absorbed this lesson with serious nods, several of them scribbling notes in their new notebooks, donated by the foundation and designed to include sections for coded messages and investigation notes, just like Elena's original journals. As the afternoon session began, Sarah received an urgent message on her tablet. The FBI task force has moved against the last major players in Sterling's network, she reported. They're using evidence from Elena's notebooks, combined with what we've uncovered since. It's really happening. The whole corrupt system is being dismantled. Sophia overheard this news as she was setting up the next activity. Her eyes met Alexander's, sharing a moment of quiet triumph. This was what her mother had worked for, what she had protected all those years, not just the exposure of corruption, but the creation of lasting change. "You know what this means?" she asked the class, her voice carrying the same passionate conviction that had characterized Elena's journalism. "It means that when we work together, when we're brave enough to tell the truth and smart enough to protect it, we can fix things that seem too big to fix." One of the younger children raised her hand. "But what if the bad guys try to stop us?" Sophia smiled, her expression wise beyond her years. "That's why we learn to code our messages, to keep records, to work together. My mom used to say that the truth is like a seed. If you protect it and help it grow, it becomes strong enough that nobody can destroy it." As the workshop continued, Alexander reflected on how far they'd come from that morning outside the courthouse. Sophia's warning had not just prevented an assassination, it had sparked a movement for truth and justice that was now spreading far beyond their city. The Elena Martinez Foundation was becoming a beacon of hope, transforming the tools of investigative journalism into instruments of empowerment for young people. Sophia's story was inspiring others to find their voice, to stand up for what was right, to believe in the power of truth to create change. "Judge Morgan," Sophia called out as the workshop was ending, "can we do this again next week? Some of the kids have already started their own investigations into problems in their neighborhoods." Alexander looked at the eager faces around her, each child clutching their notebook like a precious treasure. "Of course we can. This is exactly what your mother would have wanted, her work continuing through a new generation of truth-tellers." As they began cleaning up the classroom, Sophia carefully collected the practice codes her students had created, promising to review each one. She had taken on her role as teacher with the same dedication she brought to everything, a perfect blend of her mother's passion for truth and her own innate ability to connect with others. "Mom would love this," she said, quietly to Alexander as they walked to the car, not just catching the bad guys, but helping other kids learn to be brave and smart about fighting for what's right. Alexander wrapped an arm around her shoulders, feeling incredibly proud of the remarkable young girl who had become his daughter. "She would love it," he agreed, "and she would be so proud of how you've taken everything she taught you and used it to help others find their strength." The autumn air was crisp as Sophia stood at the podium, addressing the crowd gathered for the official opening of the Elena Martinez Center for Youth Journalism. The renovated building, once part of Sterling's corrupt network of properties, had been transformed into a beacon of hope and education. "My mom used to say that the truth needs 3 things to grow: brave people to find it, smart people to protect it, and good people to share it," Sophia began, her voice clear and confident. "This center is about creating all 3. In the audience, Alexander sat beside Sarah and Detective Torres, watching with pride as Sophia commanded the attention of journalists, city officials, and students. At 12 years old, she had grown into her role as both daughter and torchbearer of her mother's legacy. "When I was living on the streets," Sophia continued, "I thought I was alone in protecting my mum's work. But I've learned that when you stand up for the truth, you find others who will stand with you." She smiled at Alexander, their shared journey reflected in that simple gesture. The center was more than just a building. It was a testament to transformation. The ground floor housed a state-of-the-art computer lab, where children learned coding and investigative techniques. The second floor contained classrooms for journalism workshops and a research library named after Elena. The top floor, once Sterling's private office, had become a collaborative space where young investigators could work with professional journalists on real cases. Catherine Rivera, who had become a regular mentor at the center, stepped up to join Sofia at the podium. Elena Martinez believed that journalism wasn't just about exposing wrongdoing, it was about empowering people to create positive change. Today, her daughter is showing us how that vision becomes reality. As if to prove this point, a group of students from Sofia's coding workshop presented their first major investigation, a detailed report on systemic problems in the city's foster care system. Their work, conducted under the guidance of experienced journalists and supported by the Elena Martinez Foundation, had already led to policy changes and increased oversight. These young investigators, Sofia gestured to her fellow students, used the same methods my mom taught me. They learned to gather evidence, protect information, and work together to expose problems that need fixing. But most importantly, they learned that their voices matter. After the ceremony, as people mingled in the center's bright lobby, Alexander found Sofia sitting in the library, looking at the wall of photographs chronicling Elena's career. A new addition had recently been installed, a display case containing Elena's original notebooks, preserved as a reminder of how one person's dedication to truth could spark lasting change. "You did beautifully today," Alexander said, sitting beside her. "Your mother would be so proud." Sofia traced her fingers over the glass protecting her mother's notebooks. "Sometimes I still miss her so much it hurts. But then I see all of this, the center, the foundation, all the kids learning what she taught me, and I feel like she's still here, still fighting for what's right." Sarah joined them, tablet in hand as always, but now it displayed images of the center's successful programs. "The FBI's Youth Engagement Division wants to replicate this model nationwide," she reported. "They say it's revolutionizing how we approach corruption prevention and community empowerment." "Speaking of empowerment," Detective Torres added, approaching with a young officer in tow, "meet Officer Maria Ramirez. She was inspired by Sofia's story to create a special unit focusing on cases involving vulnerable youth. They're already making a difference in how the department handles these situations." Officer Ramirez smiled warmly at Sofia. "Your courage changed how we think about witnesses and evidence. Now, when a child reports something suspicious, we listen. Really listen." The center had become more than just a memorial to Elena Martinez. It was an active force for change in the community. Every week, new students arrived, eager to learn investigative techniques and coding. Many were children who, like Sofia, had faced hardships but refused to let their circumstances define them. Judge Morgan, one of Sofia's students, called out, rushing up with a notebook. "We found something interesting in our investigation of the park renovation project. Can we show you our evidence board?" Sofia grinned at Alexander. "They're using my color coding system, the one Mom taught me for tracking connections between people and events." The evidence board, displayed in one of the center's research rooms, showed an impressive web of information about questionable contracts and suspicious funding patterns. The students had documented everything meticulously, using Elena's methods adapted for their age group. "See these patterns?" the student pointed excitedly. "We think someone's trying to repeat what Sterling did, but we caught it early because we knew what to look for." Alexander examined their work with genuine interest. The investigation was thorough, the evidence well documented. These young people weren't just learning about journalism, they were actively preventing corruption by shining light into dark corners. Later that evening, as they prepared to leave the center, Sofia paused in front of the building's new sign. "The Elena Martinez Center for Youth Journalism, where truth takes root." "You know what makes me happiest," she said to Alexander. "It's not just about catching bad guys anymore. It's about teaching people how to prevent bad things from happening in the first place." Alexander wrapped an arm around her shoulders, remembering the scared but determined child who had warned him on the courthouse steps 2 years ago. That's the most powerful kind of change, the kind that grows from the ground up. As they walked to their car, Sofia chatted enthusiastically about plans for the center's next project. a citywide network of young investigators working together to monitor public projects and ensure transparency. Her mother's methods had evolved into something even more powerful, a movement led by young people committed to protecting truth and justice. The sun was setting behind the center, casting long shadows that seemed to reach toward the future. In those shadows, Alexander could almost see Elena's spirit, smiling at what her courage and her daughter's determination had created, a legacy of light that would continue to grow and spread, illuminating dark corners and empowering new generations of truth-tellers. The Elena Martinez Center buzzed with activity as students prepared for their first annual Youth Investigators Conference. Sophia moved between groups, offering guidance and encouragement, her mother's natural leadership abilities shining through in every interaction. Remember, she told a team working on environmental impact research, it's not just about finding problems, it's about documenting solutions too. Mom always said that good journalism shows people how to make things better. Alexander watched from his makeshift office in the center, where he now spent many afternoons after court sessions. The room was filled with evidence of their shared life. Sophia's school awards displayed alongside legal documents, family photos mixed with news clippings about their cases. Sarah entered with her usual quiet efficiency, but today she carried something special. Advance copies of Sophia's book, Truth Tellers: A Guide for Young Investigators. The slim volume, written with Catherine Rivera's help, adapted Elena's investigative methods for young readers. The first printing sold out in pre-orders, Sarah reported, setting a copy on Alexander's desk. Schools across the country are adding it to their curricula. They're calling it a new approach to civic education. Sophia bounded in, her energy infectious as always. Did they arrive? Can I see? She picked up a copy reverently, running her fingers over the dedication. For my mother, Elena Martinez, who taught me that truth needs brave guardians. And for my father, Alexander Morgan, who showed me that justice has many faces. The book was more than just a guide. It was a bridge between Elena's legacy and the future she had fought for. Each chapter combined practical investigative techniques with stories from Sophia's experiences, showing young readers how to recognize and document wrongdoing while staying safe. Your mother would love this, Alexander said, watching Sophia flip through the pages. You've taken everything she taught you and made it accessible to everyone. That's what she would have wanted, Sophia replied confidently. She always said knowledge is most powerful when it's shared. Detective Torres arrived as they were examining the book, bringing news about the ongoing impact of their work. The Sterling case has become a template for investigating institutional corruption, he reported. Law enforcement agencies are using Elena's methods to track complex financial schemes. But more importantly, they're learning to listen to unexpected sources. Like kids? Sophia asked with a knowing smile. Exactly like kids, Torres confirmed. The FBI's new community engagement protocols specifically emphasize the importance of taking young witnesses seriously. The conference preparations continued around them, with students setting up displays showcasing their investigations. One team had uncovered irregularities in school lunch programs. Another had documented discrimination in youth sports funding. Each project demonstrated how Elena's methods could be applied to real-world problems. Ms. Chen, a student called out using Sarah's formal name as Sophia still sometimes did, can you help us with our presentation? We want to show how we use the coding system to track pattern changes. Sarah moved to assist them, her organizational skills now regularly deployed in service of young investigators. The center had become a second home for all of them, a place where justice wasn't just an ideal, but a daily practice. Judge Morgan, another student, approached anxiously. We found something in our research about the new downtown development project. It's complicated. Could you look at our evidence? Alexander followed the student to their research station, where a carefully constructed timeline showed potential connections between city officials and private developers. The investigation was thorough, the documentation meticulous, Elena's methods combined with youthful determination. Sophia helped us organize it. the student explained proudly. She taught us how to protect our sources and build a solid evidence chain. As Alexander reviewed their work, he reflected on how much had changed. 2 years ago, these same students might have felt powerless against corruption. Now they were, actively working to prevent it, armed with knowledge and supported by a community of truth-tellers. Catherine Rivera arrived for the conference's keynote speech, pausing to embrace Sophia. "Your mother changed journalism by showing us the importance of protecting sources and evidence," she told her. "You're changing it again by teaching the next generation how to carry that work forward." The conference opened with a ceremony honoring young investigators who had made significant contributions to their communities. Sophia, as the center's youth director, presented the awards, each one named after a principle Eleanor had lived by: the Courage in Reporting Award, the Protection of Truth Award, the Community Impact Award. "When I was living on the streets," Sophia addressed the gathered students, "I thought being brave meant being alone. But my mum taught me that true courage means helping others find their strength. That's what we're doing here, not just exposing problems, but empowering people to solve them." As the day progressed, Alexander watched Sophia move confidently through the crowd, encouraging younger students, advising older ones, building the connections that would strengthen their network of young investigators. She had grown into her role naturally, combining Elena's passion for truth with her own gift for bringing people together. "You know what makes this different from regular journalism programs?" Sophia asked him during a quiet moment. "We're not just teaching kids to write stories. We're teaching them to be part of the story, to make things better in their own communities." Alexander nodded, understanding. The center wasn't just creating young journalists, it was nurturing active citizens, people who would carry Elena's legacy of courage and integrity into every field they entered. As the conference wound down, Sophia gathered her student investigators for a final session. "Remember," she told them, "every big change starts with someone paying attention, asking questions, and being brave enough to speak up. That's what my mom did. That's what all of you are doing, and that's how we make the world better, one truth at a time." The setting sun streamed through the center's windows, illuminating the wall of success stories. Investigations that had led to positive changes, corruptions prevented, communities improved. Each story was a testament to Elena's legacy, living on through her daughter and the young people she inspired. The news broke on a quiet Tuesday morning. Robert Sterling had agreed to a comprehensive plea deal. In exchange for a reduced sentence, he would provide detailed testimony about the entire network of corruption, including names that had remained hidden even through months of investigation. Sophia was in the center's computer lab, teaching a coding workshop, when Sarah brought the news. The young instructor paused briefly, absorbing the information with the measured thoughtfulness she'd developed over the past 2 years. "Does this mean it's really over?" she asked, her voice carrying a mix of hope and caution. "It means we're entering a new phase," Sarah replied carefully. "Sterling's testimony will help us prevent similar schemes from happening in the future." The students in the lab watched this exchange with keen interest. Many of them had been following the Sterling case as part of their investigative training, using it as a case study in how corruption networks operate and how they can be dismantled. "Miss Sophia," one student raised her hand, "can we use our tracking system to document Sterling's connections as they're revealed, like a real-time investigation?" Sophia's face brightened at the suggestion. "That's exactly what we should do. Mum always said that understanding how something happened is the key to preventing it from happening again." The next few days saw the center transform into a hub of focused activity. Students worked in teams, applying Elena's methods to organize and analyze the flood of new information. The walls of the research room filled with charts and timelines, each revelation carefully documented and cross-referenced. Alexander, watching this organic response to the news, felt a profound sense of pride. What had started as one reporter's investigation, preserved by her daughter's courage, had evolved into a movement that was changing how an entire generation approached the concept of civic responsibility. "Judge Morgan," called out a teenage researcher, "we found something interesting in the pattern analysis. The foundation wasn't just laundering money, they were systematically weakening other charitable organizations that might have exposed them. "Show me," Alexander said, joining the student at their evidence board. The presentation was impressive, a clear demonstration of how Sterling's organization had used their influence to redirect funding away from legitimate youth programs, creating the very problems they claimed to be solving. "We call it the shadow effect," explained another student. "They created shadows to hide in, but also to keep others in the dark." Sophia, who had been listening nearby, approached the board with her characteristic focused expression. "That's why Mom started investigating the shelter funding first. She saw the pattern when no one else was looking for it." Detective Torres arrived later that afternoon for his regular check-in, now part of the center's ongoing collaboration with law enforcement. He found the research room buzzing with purposeful energy as students documented each new revelation from Sterling's testimony. "This is remarkable," he said to Alexander, watching the young investigators at work. "They're not just learning about justice, they're actively participating in its preservation." "It's what Elena would have wanted," Alexander replied, "not just exposing corruption, but teaching others how to prevent it." Sophia had gathered a group of younger students, helping them understand the complex financial trails they were tracking. Her teaching style mirrored Elena's approach, making complex concepts accessible through creative analogies and practical examples. "Think of it like a garden," she explained to her rapt audience. "The bad guys try to plant their corrupt ideas in the dark, where no one can see them grow. Our job is to shine light on those places, to make sure everything grows in the open where everyone can see it." Sarah, who had been coordinating with media outlets about Sterling's revelations, joined them with updates. "The national press is picking up on our student investigators' analysis. They're calling it a new model of civic engagement, young people actively participating in the preservation of democratic institutions." "Mum would love that phrase," Sophia grinned. "Preservation of democratic institutions." She used to say that democracy needs gardeners, people who tend to it and help it grow strong. As the day progressed, more revelations emerged from Sterling's testimony. Each new piece of information was met with methodical analysis by the center's young investigators, their work demonstrating a sophistication that impressed even veteran journalists. "You've created something extraordinary here," Catherine Rivera commented during her weekly mentoring session. "These kids aren't just learning about investigative journalism, they're reinventing it for their generation." The center had indeed evolved beyond its original conception. What had started as a tribute to Elena Martinez had become an incubator for a new kind of civic engagement, where young people learned not just to recognize corruption, but to actively work against it. That evening, as the last students were leaving, Sophia stood before the wall of evidence they'd assembled. "It's like Mom's work is still growing," she said thoughtfully. "Every new person who learns these skills, every investigation that prevents corruption, it's all part of her legacy." Alexander joined her, noting how the setting sun cast their shadows on the wall of evidence, father and daughter united in their commitment to justice. "Your mother gave you the tools to protect the truth," he said, "but you've done something even more remarkable. You've taught others how to use those tools to build a better future." Sophia touched one of her mother's original notebooks, now preserved in a display case alongside modern tablets and computers. "Mom used to say that fighting corruption is like planting a garden. It takes time, patience, and lots of people working together to make things grow right." As they prepared to leave for the day, a group of students rushed in, excited about a new discovery in their analysis of Sterling's testimony. Sophia immediately turned her attention to their findings, her natural leadership abilities shining through as she helped them organize their thoughts and evidence. Alexander watched, remembering the scared but determined child who had warned him on the courthouse steps. She had grown into a remarkable young woman, carrying forward her mother's legacy, while creating something entirely new, a movement that empowered young people to become active guardians of truth and justice. The morning of Sterling's formal sentencing brought a sense of culmination to the years of investigation and revelation. The courthouse steps, where Sophia had once warned Alexander about an assassination attempt, now hosted a gathering of young investigators from the Elena Martinez Center, each carrying notebooks and tablets. "Remember," Sophia instructed her fellow students, "we're not just here to watch, we're here to document. This is how history gets recorded accurately." Inside the courtroom, Alexander sat on the bench, preparing to deliver a sentence that would reflect not just the legal weight of Sterling's crimes, but their broader impact on society. Sophia sat in the front row beside Sarah, her posture reflecting the perfect balance of professional composure and personal investment. "Before I deliver my sentence," Alexander began, his voice carrying the authority of his position, "I want to acknowledge the extraordinary circumstances that brought us to this moment. This case has revealed not just a network of corruption, but also the power of truth when protected and nurtured by brave individuals." Sterling sat at the defendant's table, his once powerful presence diminished by the weight of his exposed crimes. His testimony had led to dozens of arrests and the recovery of millions in stolen funds, but more importantly, it had validated Elena Martinez's original investigation. "Your Honor," Sterling's attorney began, "my client's cooperation has been instrumental in exposing and dismantling corrupt practices that had become deeply embedded in our institutions." "Yes," Alexander agreed, "but let us be clear about what prompted that cooperation. It wasn't conscience that moved your client to reveal the truth. It was the undeniable weight of evidence gathered first by Elena Martinez, preserved by her daughter, and finally brought to light by a community of young people committed to justice." The young investigators in the gallery took careful notes, their tablets and notebooks capturing every detail. They had studied this case from every angle, using it to understand how corruption operates and how it can be prevented. "The sentence I am about to pronounce," Alexander continued, "takes into account not just the letter of the law but its spirit, the fundamental principle that justice must serve the common good and protect the most vulnerable among us." As he delivered the sentence, Alexander noticed Sophia's steady gaze. She had grown into a remarkable young woman, combining her mother's passion for truth with her own natural gift for building communities and nurturing new generations of truth-tellers. After the proceedings, the steps of the courthouse became a gathering place for celebration and reflection. The young investigators shared their observations, their analytical minds already processing the implications of the day's events. "This isn't just about one case," Sophia explained to a group of reporters who had gathered to interview the student investigators. "It's about creating a system where corruption can't take root because there are always people watching, documenting, and speaking up." Catherine Rivera, covering the event for her network, smiled proudly at her young protégé. "Elena's methods have evolved into something she could never have imagined, a movement led by young people who understand that democracy requires active participation and constant vigilance." Sarah, ever efficient, was already coordinating the center's next projects. "The students want to create a public database of their Sterling case analysis," she reported. "They think it could help other communities identify and prevent similar corruption schemes." Detective Torres, who had become a regular mentor at the center, joined them with his own news. "The FBI is implementing new protocols based on your student investigators' methods. They're calling it the Martinez Protocol, systematic documentation, combined with community engagement." As the crowd began to disperse, Sophia found a quiet moment with Alexander. "Do you think Mom knew?" she asked softly. "When she was teaching me all those codes and patterns, do you think she knew what it would become?" Alexander considered this thoughtfully. "I think she knew that truth needs guardians in every generation. She gave you the tools to protect her. Work, but you've done something even more remarkable. You've taught others how to become guardians themselves." The Elena Martinez Center had become more than just a memorial or an educational facility. It was a living laboratory of civic engagement, where young people learned not just to recognize injustice, but to actively work toward positive change. "You know what makes me happiest?" Sophia said, watching her fellow student investigators discussing their next projects. "Seeing how every new person who learns these skills becomes part of Mom's legacy. It's like she's still teaching, still fighting for justice, through all of us. As they walked back to the center, Sophia pointed out new investigation boards being set up by her students. Each project represented a different aspect of civic oversight: environmental protection, education equity, public resource allocation. Elena's methods had provided the foundation, but these young investigators were building something new. Mom always said that fighting corruption is like tending a garden, Sophia reflected. You have to keep watching, keep caring, keep working to help good things grow. But now we have so many gardeners all working together. The setting sun cast long shadows through the center's windows, but unlike the shadows that had once hidden corruption, these were filled with promise, the promise of a new generation committed to protecting truth and justice, armed with the tools to make real change. Alexander watched as Sophia joined a group of students planning their next investigation. The scared but brave child who had warned him on the courthouse steps had grown into a leader, a teacher, and a guardian of truth. Together they had transformed a tragedy into triumph, creating a legacy that would continue to grow and flourish in the light of truth. The 5th anniversary of the Elena Martinez Center arrived on a beautiful spring morning. The building, once a symbol of corruption, had been transformed into a bustling hub of youth activism and investigative journalism. Today, it would host its most significant event yet, the first National Youth Investigators Summit. Sophia, now 14, stood in her mother's restored office preparing her keynote speech. The room had been carefully preserved, with Elena's original desk serving as a reminder of where everything had started. New additions, awards, photographs, and success stories covered the walls, telling the story of how one reporter's courage had sparked a national movement. "Ready for the big day?" Alexander asked, entering with 2 cups of hot chocolate, their traditional drink for important moments. "Almost," Sophia replied, adjusting her professional blazer. "A gift from Catherine Rivera for the occasion. I've been thinking about what Mum would say if she could see all this." The center had exceeded everyone's expectations. What began as a local initiative had spread to dozens of cities across the country. Young investigators trained in Elena's methods had uncovered and prevented numerous corruption schemes, their work earning recognition from law enforcement agencies and journalism institutions alike. Sarah arrived with the day's schedule, her tablet now containing coordination details for centers in multiple cities. "The first delegations are arriving. We have young investigators from 23 states represented today." The main hall had been transformed into a conference space, with investigation boards from various youth teams displayed proudly. Each project showcased how Elena's methods had been adapted and enhanced by a new generation of truth seekers. "Look at this," Sophia said excitedly, pointing to one display. The team from Chicago used Mom's coding system to track environmental violations. They've already helped shut down 3 illegal dumping operations. Another board showed how students in Miami had uncovered irregularities in school construction, contracts preventing millions in fraudulent spending. A team from Seattle had adapted Elena's documentation methods to monitor city council decisions, creating a public database that promoted transparency in local government. "Ms. Sophia," called out a young investigator from Detroit, rushing up with her team. "We implemented your mother's pattern recognition system in our Neighborhood Watch program. Crime rates have dropped by 30%. Sophia beamed with pride, seeing her mother's legacy flourishing in ways neither of them could have imagined during those dark days on the streets. Each success story represented lives improved, communities strengthened, and corruption prevented before it could take root. Detective Torres arrived with a special surprise. The FBI had officially adopted the Martinez Protocol as part of their standard training program. "Your mother's methods are now being taught to federal agents," he told Sophia. "They're particularly impressed with how the youth programs have created a new generation of civic-minded citizens." As the conference room filled with young investigators and their mentors, Catherine Rivera took her place at the press table. The event was being covered by major news outlets, recognizing the significance of this youth-led movement for transparency and justice. "Before we begin," Catherine announced to her fellow journalists, "I want you to understand what makes this different from typical youth programs. These aren't just kids playing at being investigators. They're active citizens who have already prevented millions in corruption and inspired real institutional change." Sophia's keynote speech was scheduled to open the summit. As she reviewed her notes one final time, Alexander noticed her touching the locket she always wore, the one containing a small photo of Elena. "Mom taught me that truth needs 3 things," Sophia began, her voice clear and confident as she addressed the packed auditorium. "It needs brave people to find it, smart people to protect it, and good people to share it. But she also taught me something else, something I didn't understand until I found my new family and saw how many other people wanted to fight for justice." She paused, looking out at the sea of young faces, each representing a different community but united in their commitment to truth and transparency. "What I learned is that the most powerful force against corruption isn't just exposing wrongdoing. It's building communities of people who work together to prevent it. Every one of you here today is proof of that. You've taken the methods my mum developed and used them to make real changes in your communities." The young investigators listened intently, many taking notes in journals similar to Elena's original notebooks. They had studied her methods, adapted her techniques, and created something new, a network of young people dedicated to protecting truth and justice. "Some people think kids can't make a difference," Sophia continued, her voice carrying the same passionate conviction that had characterized her mother's journalism. "But we've proved them wrong. In the past year alone, youth investigators across the country have prevented over $50 million in corruption, exposed dozens of schemes before they could take root, and helped create new standards for transparency in public institutions." Alexander watched from the side of the stage, remembering the scared but determined child who had warned him on the courthouse steps 5 years ago. She had grown into a remarkable young woman, carrying forward her mother's legacy while creating something entirely new. As Sophia concluded her speech, the audience erupted in applause. Young investigators from different cities began sharing their stories, their successes, and their plans for the future. The energy in the room was palpable, a feeling of purpose and possibility that Elena Martinez had inspired and her daughter had helped bring to life. "This is just the beginning," Sophia told a group of new investigators after her speech. "Every time we expose corruption, every time we prevent injustice, we're planting seeds of change that will keep growing. That's what Mom started, and that's what we're all continuing together." The summit continued throughout the day, with workshops, presentations, and strategy sessions. Young investigators shared techniques, celebrated successes, and planned future collaborations. The spirit of Elena Martinez lived on in each of them, not just in their methods but in their unwavering commitment to truth and justice. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow through the center's windows, Sophia stood in her mother's office once more. The room was quiet now, but the building still hummed with the energy of young voices sharing stories, making plans, and carrying forward the work that